you ever had a conversation with someone and suddenly felt that something was off? They were smiling, they were talking normally, they were even telling you everything was fine. But somehow, you felt like their words didn't match their behavior. Maybe you've experienced this with a friend, maybe with someone you just met. Or maybe you've trusted someone completely, only to realize later that the signs were there all along. The problem is, most people don't know what to look for. We listen to words, we watch the obvious things, and we ignore the tiny details happening underneath. But human behavior constantly gives us information. The way someone reacts to a question, the way their voice changes, the things they avoid talking about, the way they treat people who can't do anything for them, and even the difference between what they promise and what they actually do. In today's video, I'm going to show you 7 psychological techniques that can help you understand people on a much deeper level. Not because you can literally read someone's mind. You can't. And anyone who tells you that one gesture can reveal exactly what someone is thinking is oversimplifying psychology. Instead, we're going to learn how to notice patterns. Because one signal can be meaningless, but several signals appearing together can tell you that something deserves your attention. So let's begin. The first trick is something most people completely ignore. Establish their baseline. Before you try to understand someone's unusual behavior, you need to understand what their normal behavior looks like. Think about it. Imagine meeting someone who naturally avoids eye contact. If they look away while talking to you, that doesn't necessarily mean they're hiding something. That's simply how they communicate. But imagine that person normally looks directly at you. And suddenly, whenever you ask about a particular subject, they stop looking at you. Now you've noticed a change. And changes are much more useful than isolated behaviours. Pay attention to how someone normally speaks. How energetic are they? How expressive are they? Do they normally use their hands while talking? Do they usually answer questions immediately? Do they joke a lot? Do they normally sit relaxed?
Once you understand their baseline, unusual behavior becomes easier to notice. For example, imagine you're talking to a friend who normally speaks very confidently. You ask them about their weekend. They answer normally. Then you mention a certain person's name. Suddenly, their speech becomes slower. Their answers become shorter. They start looking around the room. Maybe they begin touching their phone. You shouldn't immediately conclude that they're lying. But you can conclude one thing. Something about that topic changed their emotional state. And that's worth noticing. The second trick is to pay attention to what people avoid. People often think that communication is about what someone says. But sometimes, the most interesting information is hidden in what they don't say. Imagine asking someone a simple question. Why did you do that? Instead of answering, they start talking about how everyone else behaved. They explain what other people did wrong. They give you 5 different reasons. But somehow, they never answer the actual question. That's a pattern. And patterns matter. When people feel uncomfortable, they may redirect conversations. They may change the subject. They may attack the person asking the question. Or they may give extremely complicated explanations to avoid a simple answer. None of these behaviors automatically mean someone is lying. But if a person repeatedly avoids the same topic, you should notice it. Sometimes people don't hide information by saying something false. Sometimes they hide it by making sure you never get a direct answer. The third trick is to observe emotional reactions instead of just facial expressions. You've probably heard that you can read someone's feelings by looking at their face. And that's partly true. But the face can also be controlled. People smile when they're uncomfortable. They laugh when they're nervous. They say they're okay when they're clearly stressed. That's why you should look beyond the obvious expression. Ask yourself, does their emotional reaction match the situation? Imagine someone tells you a story about something supposedly exciting. They're smiling. They're saying they're happy. But their voice sounds flat. Their body is tense. And their smile disappears almost immediately. That doesn't prove they're pretending. Maybe they're tired. Maybe something else is bothering them. But the mismatch between different signals tells you that there may be more going on emotionally. This is why reading people is not about looking for one magic sign. It's about comparing different pieces of information. Words, tone, facial expression, body position, and context. The fourth trick is to listen to changes in someone's voice. Most people listen to the words. Very few people listen to the delivery. But your voice can change when your emotional state changes. Think about what happens when someone becomes nervous. They might start speaking faster. They may repeat themselves. They might pause more than usual. Their voice could become quieter. Or sometimes they become louder because they're trying to appear confident. Now imagine you're having a normal conversation with someone. They're relaxed. They're joking. Everything seems natural. Then you ask a question that makes them uncomfortable. Suddenly, they pause. They take longer to answer. Their voice changes. Maybe they start over-explaining. That doesn't mean you've caught them in a lie. But you've discovered something more useful. The question created pressure. And pressure can reveal emotional sensitivity. So instead of asking yourself, are they lying? Ask, why did their behavior change? That's a much smarter question. The fifth trick is mirroring. Mirroring is something humans often do without realizing it. When people feel comfortable with each other, they may naturally begin matching each other's behavior. They may sit in similar positions, use similar expressions, match each other's speaking rhythm, or even start using the same phrases. Think about two close friends. One person leans forward. A few moments later, the other person does the same. One person smiles. The other smiles. One person lowers their voice. The other starts speaking more quietly. This can happen naturally because humans unconsciously synchronize with people they feel connected to. But don't turn this into a game. If someone doesn't mirror you, that doesn't mean they dislike you. And if someone mirrors you, it doesn't automatically mean they trust you. Again, we're looking for patterns. If someone consistently seems comfortable around you, faces toward you, engages with your conversation, and naturally matches your rhythm, those behaviors together may indicate social connection. sixth trick is one of the best ways to understand someone's real personality. Watch how they react when they don't get what they want. Anyone can appear kind when everything is going their way. The real test comes when you say no.
Imagine you refuse a small request. A respectful person might be disappointed. They might say, "Okay, I understand," and move on. But someone who needs control may react differently. They might become angry. They might give you the silent treatment. They might make you feel guilty. They might say, "Wow, I thought you actually cared about me." That sentence might sound emotional, but look at what's happening underneath. Your decision is being turned into a test of your love, loyalty, or friendship. This is a common form of emotional pressure, and learning to recognize it can protect you from manipulation. Remember this: a person who respects you doesn't have to agree with every decision you make, but they should be able to respect your right to make that decision. That's an important difference. The seventh trick is perhaps the most powerful of all. Watch consistency. Words are easy. Anyone can say, "I respect you. I care about you. You can trust me. I'm always here for you." But what happens after the conversation ends? Do their actions match their words? If someone says they respect your boundaries but repeatedly crosses them, pay attention. If someone says they care about you but only contacts you when they need something, pay attention. If someone promises to change but repeats exactly the same behavior again and again, pay attention. You don't have to argue. You don't have to expose them. You don't even have to accuse them. Just observe. Because repeated behavior is often more reliable than beautiful promises. And this brings us to one of the most important rules of reading people. Never judge someone from one moment. One strange reaction doesn't define a person. One nervous movement doesn't make someone dishonest. One uncomfortable conversation doesn't reveal their entire personality. Context matters. Maybe someone avoided eye contact because they were tired. Maybe their voice changed because they were nervous. Maybe they crossed their arms because the room was cold. That's why experienced observers don't immediately jump to conclusions. They collect information. They compare behavior. They look for repetition. And they ask, does this happen again and again? That's the difference between observation and paranoia. Paranoia assumes. Observation investigates. There's another situation where people reveal a lot about themselves. Watch how they treat people who have nothing to offer them. Watch how they speak to waiters. Watch how they treat strangers. Watch how they behave around someone less powerful than them. Watch what happens when nobody important is watching. Because when people are trying to impress you, they may show you the version of themselves they want you to see. But when they don't think they need to impress anyone, their natural behavior often becomes more visible. And sometimes, you can learn more about a person's character from how they treat a stranger than from how politely they treat you. There's also a simple question you can ask yourself when you're unsure about someone. Do their actions make me feel respected or constantly confused? Not every confusing situation means manipulation. But if someone's words and actions constantly contradict each other, and you repeatedly find yourself questioning what is real, that pattern deserves attention. Healthy relationships don't require you to constantly decode someone. You shouldn't have to become a detective just to understand whether someone respects you. And this is where psychology becomes useful. The goal isn't to become suspicious of everyone. The goal isn't to manipulate people before they manipulate you. The goal is awareness. When you understand human behavior, you become better at recognizing patterns. You become better at setting boundaries. You become better at noticing emotional pressure. And you become less likely to ignore your own observations. So the next time you're talking to someone, don't just listen to their words. Slow down, observe, notice their baseline, notice their reactions, notice what they avoid, listen to their tone, watch for patterns, and most importantly, compare what they say with what they repeatedly do. Because people can control their words, they can prepare their stories, they can create a perfect first impression. But consistency is much harder to fake. And remember one final thing. Reading people isn't about discovering everyone's secrets. It's about understanding them without losing your own judgment. You don't need to assume the worst. You simply need to notice what is actually happening. Because sometimes, the biggest warning sign isn't something someone says. It's the pattern you keep noticing, but keep choosing to ignore. So observe carefully, listen closely, trust patterns more than promises, and never let someone's words become more important than their actions. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Facts-With-Emaan for more psychology, human behavior, manipulation tactics, and dark psychology insights. And remember, people may control what they tell you, but their patterns usually tell you much more. I'll see you in the next one.